What's up, guys? We have a new exclusive interview with the developers from We the People, small indie company. Drew and a few of the guys from the team sat down with our team, and we have some exclusive stuff to share with you guys that you may or may not know. Most of it you will not know. You're going to hear some of them talk on specific parts of the game, as well as me providing some of the answers that they gave to the other questions. Before I hop into it, make sure you join the Discord below. If you enjoy these types of games, the extraction shooter, tactical shooter, all that stuff, we play them all. So go ahead, hop in. I'd love to see you there. So, number one, the devlog was captured in engine. That's a huge thing. A lot of people were thinking it's probably cinematics and whatnot, but all of that stuff was in engine. And it's going to be extremely similar to the gameplay. So that's good. The second thing, they have been going through a large inventory rework. They've actually had a few iterations of this if you've been keeping up with their progression of developing the game. And apparently right now, the one that they've settled on is going to look even better than they believe looks even better than the current one in the devlog that you have seen. So GAS, game playability system, I'm going to let Eric talk about this. I'm gonna play his audio clip in a minute, but basically the gist of it is they're using this system with Unreal to get to do a lot of different things that they otherwise would not have been able to do. So here is Eric.
Yeah, so like, say I want to do like a mag check. Like previously we would have to make a bunch of code where it's like, hey, they're gonna do a mag check right now. Make sure they're allowed to do that, check if they're doing this, this, and this. If so, they can't. Otherwise they can. And now we need to tell the player, hey, they're doing it. Start coordinating to play those animations. Make sure they're not doing anything else in the middle of that. But if we're using something like the gameplay ability system, we can just make like a whole new ability called like mag check, and then give it these tags like, it requires that you don't have the aiming tag, or you don't have the sprinting tag, and that'll just, as long as all those conditions are met, it'll just play, and that's all we have to do, and it just makes it so much easier. And if we have something similar like inspect animation, we can just copy that and just change it a little bit.
Next is going to be team sizes, going to be 5 or less. And that's going to be who you queue with, who you go into the raid with. Of course, you could work with other PMCs or kill them, obviously, when you run into them, similar to Tarkov and Gray Zone and whatnot. But yeah, queuing up, 5 teammates or less. Variable crouching, which I know you've already seen, you're going to be able to reassign all of those keybinds, and there's going to be a ton of options to make it unique to your playstyle. Kind of the thing that Drew and the team have run into is making We the People have its own identity. There's a lot of games and really a lot of competition now in this genre. We've seen even the arcade experiences recently with Marathon and Arc Raiders, but there's still, in my opinion, there's still a very loud calling for the grounded tactical FPS extraction shooter that is similar to Tarkov. So if I had to gauge everything, because everybody's going to compare games to games, they are trying to make, in my opinion, I actually have a video on it on my channel, they're trying to make the American Tarkov based out of the Pacific Northwest of the United States, but they're putting their own twist and their own lore, and they're going to have zombies, they're going to have all this stuff. It's an alternative history, an alternative timeline that's happened with a modern shooter. So I'm gonna let you listen real quick to Drew talk about them trying to establish their own lane with We the People, even though they're quote unquote standing on the shoulders of giants.
The evolution of this over the past 2 years now has been our opportunity to be like, hey, the original approach was how close can we get to some of these games we like, and that painted us in like a very particular light, and now we're seeing opportunity to maybe do our own take on a few things, and maybe establish a lane for ourselves.
I like that, and from what I saw, I mean, it definitely, to me at least, felt like you guys are definitely developing this game with your own identity. It doesn't feel like it's like there's always going to be that comparison, right? It looks like X, it looks like Y, but everything that I saw was you guys are taking shots, and I love it.
Yeah, and rightfully so, right? Like, especially when so early on in our development, it was very derivative, and by the way, I say that from like the very beginning. You're sort of standing on the shoulder of giants. Like, you and I have had that conversation before, right? So there's no escaping that. No pun intended. But generally, I think, we have a different gameplay loop to bring out, and there's a lot of ways where we think we can do that. And I think those will be the very obvious ways we differ. But how far we differ, I guess, remains to be seen.
Next was really damage and zombie dismemberment with damaging the AI, damaging zombies, and taking damage yourself. They're kind of playing with a few different ideas with the medical system that I want to get into. This is probably, in my opinion, as of late, what really stands out with the realistic shooters is how the medical system is portrayed, how damage is taken to you. Can you break a leg and still sprint if you put a little splint on it, or a little tourniquet on a heavy bleed, or are you just good to go? Now, I know games have to be playable, they have to be fun, but when I listen to this interview, I wasn't there, unfortunately. I was busy. I had to listen to it after the fact. But one thing that stuck out to me was how they're trying to make the medical system and the effects of the player all tie into one. So I'm just going to give you the breakdown of what we've learned. The medical system is going to have way more depth than just bullet damage. You're going to be dealing with radiation, my favorite, adrenaline, temperature, being sick, possibly infected. All these different things, they haven't told us this, but I believe that's why he's smoking the cigarette around the campfire before or after a raid, because he's trying to maybe get his adrenaline under control, get his character kind of back to baseline so he can go into this raid without, many side effects. So that's a lot more depth than the general extraction shooter that we see. And I believe firmly right now, if they focus on that, that is where they can stand out to really make a shooter be more immersive than the kind of games we already have today. Grayzone's medical system is pretty solid. Tarkov's is really solid, but adding these different things, temperature, adrenaline, radiation, and then I'm going to go ahead and add this too. I got the go ahead from Drew himself, being able to heal your teammates and other players you find in the raids. I think that's huge. So I'm trying to picture a potential raid. And I'm not saying this is how it will play out. This is kind of me just spinning my own little imagination. Imagine finding a guy that was fighting a lot of zombies in raid. He's messed up, he's hurt, he might be sick. And instead of killing him, which I obviously would, but others can help him. They can provide medical assistance. They can give him, things to help with the sickness. Maybe he has a fever. I don't know. Like all these types of different things can be applied to yourself and to potential other PMCs, your teammates, all that. Right now, as it stands, there's a little bit of that with Grayzone. There's none of that with Tarkov. And if they can make that somewhat of a huge focus for the game, it's going to make it immersive. It's going to make it fun to play with others. And in my opinion, it's going to be one of the biggest sections in the game that I'm going to be excited for.
We have been considering, moving away from just a purely limb-based, like, hey, you get hit in the arm, your arm's having problems, to, well, maybe you got hit in a specific organ, or maybe you got hit somewhere near your femoral artery. So there's definitely things like that we're trying to consider, and we would like to make it feel unique and immersive and hopefully complicated. Not to the extent that it's going to be difficult for you to treat yourself. Difficult as in navigating the mechanics. Of course, there's going to be difficulty in figuring out, what do I have to do to fix myself right now?
So I don't know how much people know about this. I know that I didn't know really anything about it. They do want to have a skill system. They want it to be a passive system, similar to Tarkov, for example, reloading. They understand there's a slippery slope with having experience and time playing, which can correlate to winning and PvP because of skills. So they're really trying to focus on a balance, which I think is good. They're not just kind of going in blind. The more you play, the stronger you are, the faster you are, all this stuff, and you just win because of playtime. So I love that they have the skills. And I also love that they're trying to come up with a balance where a person that can only play a couple hours a week, 3 weeks into a wipe, maybe even 2 months into a wipe, isn't always losing to someone who's been playing 8 hours a day. So Drew asked Yeti, who was conducting this interview, he asked him, Yeti as a player prefers a cleaner animation versus a simple animation. And Yeti answered how I would have answered. A little bit of both, but leaning on the cleaner animations. We have to remember in these games, a lot of people play them for that immersion factor while also still trying to have fun. Where instead of just doing the action, a lot of time when you're immersed in the map, you feel like you're doing the action, if that makes any sense. It probably doesn't. Let's move on. Another one is they're trying to put a serious effort going into early wipe and then progression through early wipe. And they've admitted that it's not easy, but they have the bow option, which is still probably my favorite weapon that they have in the game thus far. They want the early wipe to have a lot of meaning. They want the early wipe to last longer versus some of these other games.
A thing we've all experienced playing these games, and we're kind of in the same boat as many folks, you know, who are just generally gaming on their free time, in their free time. That is, one issue tends to be, you know, the game essentially running its course a little sooner than it needs to. And again, thinking about that moment, like you're saying, the high stakes, you know, if you're kind of wearing low tier gear and you pick up a high tier piece of gear, that's a really good feeling. We kind of want to bring back that oh shit moment. I remember back in the day, I'd play War Z, an old zombie game, later turned into Infestation Survivor Stories. But if you found night vision in that game, it was such a cool feeling. It was insane. It was like, oh shit, I gotta get this back to the safe zone. That's like, you know, that's now my main priority. And you're walking around like an HVT, and your buddies with you in that group are, you know, they're like your guards. Like, we're gonna get you back. You're gonna get this. You're gonna get this MVG. You know.
The next question was customization and the depth of customization. They want, and I quote, as much customization as possible, but they also don't want it to be so easy to customize. They want depth of being able to swap something like a barrel mod, maybe putting a suppressor if you have a certain threaded barrel, maybe swapping sights or adding 2 sights if you have the right rail. They want you to be able to do that. But they also mentioned out of raid, which I think this is key, having something like potentially a workbench or an area where you can actually do more customization and some of the critical components like a bolt carrier, maybe the lower receiver, things like that, where you have to literally take the gun apart, and you're not going to be doing that in raid because you might need tools or whatever. Not saying that they're going to have these tools, but you know, they're going to have a simulation of being able to do more in-depth customization out of raid, potentially like at the settlement versus in the raid. So having kind of that both options, I think, is really cool. If I go into raid and I'm using, you know, 308 or 7.62x5.1, and I find, you know, a good suppressor, you know, in the game, QD mount, and I can put it on there in the raid, maybe have the animation, you know, going back to gas and the animations that they're trying to do. If I can do that in the raid, that's sick. Not just, and I'm kind of calling to the team right now. I know it's a lot more work, but right now, Tarkov, you just simply drag it to the gun and, you know, it's on the gun. I know that's simple. I know that works. But the care that I'm dying for them to have for it, and I know that they do, is those animations, man. Screwing the suppressor on, you know, tightening the new red dot that you have on your rail, making sure, you know, even potentially different spots, you know, moving it closer or further away for eye relief and whatnot. You know, I'm not saying that's a thing. This is, again, speculation, but that would be so cool to kind of add to, again, this immersion factor that we're trying to capture. The next topic was modularity, kind of keeping it in the player's hands. For example, there's a compass on the watch, which I think is huge. I'm not a big UI guy, and I think most people that play these types of titles agree with me. So being able to turn that off, having it in a different area, maybe even potentially putting a compass on the HUD, is something that you're going to be able to do. They really want players to have a lot to say for what's on their screen, which is good. And, you know, I love having that stuff for thumbnails, of course. So the PDA, they're going to have a PDA system. You have to actively open it. You're going to be putting your gun away. The example they gave us is asking your squad to pull security in somewhat of a hot zone while you look at your map and see where you need to go. I knew all of this, but I wasn't thinking deeply enough. What this is going to do, one of the biggest complaints that I have, or that I hear when I try to bring new players into Escape from Tarkov, is not being able to learn the maps, having to go to the wiki. You know, now all that's friction. All of it is hard. It's hardcore. I got it. But having a little bit of a middle ground and having a PDA system, even if it doesn't reveal everything that you need, having somewhat of a direction with a compass, all of these things give it a little bit more accessibility. And I think it's a great approach for what they're trying to do. It's letting people being able to play the game, learn the game a little bit quicker, while also not making it too accessible, too easy. So 2 more. A big one for me was Sane AI for SPT. The individual that made the Sane AI mod for SPT is the AI lead in We the People. If you've used that mod, you know how good it is. That's a very good thing to hear. Lastly, this one's big. They want, and they've kind of touched on it before, they do want player interaction and 100% a commerce point outside of raid. This is probably going to be the settlement. So being able to trade, barter, talk to other people, whether it be via menus, like a flea market on Tarkov. I don't know how accessible it's going to be, or seeing people in the settlement like a little hub. Either way, very good. So that's it, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know what you're most excited about, what you're worried about, what you'd love to see, and maybe some questions that you want asked next time we sit down with the team. Again, make sure you subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. We love covering all the tactical FPS games coming up, and hop in the Discord. That's all we have for you guys, and we will catch you on the next video. Thank you.